On today's episode of the Unveil podcast, I had the great pleasure of sitting down with Kate Appleton in her very own office, which is magical. Now, Kate has worked as a special ed teacher, community counsellor, creative coach, and family consultant. Kate is a contributing author to the recent guidelines written for combining SE, so Somatic Experiencing, and SSP, which is the Safe Sound Protocol, in clinical practice. Her work is informed by somatic-based approaches to healing that address the intersection of early developmental movement patterns and attachment, sensory integration theory with specific use of sound frequency modalities, traumatology, the use of creative expressive arts, and the archetypal exploration of the narrative. As a psychotherapist, she integrates models such as somatic experiencing, embodied recovery, transforming touch, and safe sound protocol, and IFS parts work. Kate creates the space for spiritual emergence to unfold in a client's search for their authentic self. That all sounds very clinical because Kate has a wealth of experience and deep passion about this work that she does. But as you will hear during this episode, Kate is creative. She values the inclusion of energy work, karmic archetypal astrology. She builds connections to intergenerational patterns and family constellation mapping. She is a powerhouse. She's also delightfully funny, supremely creative, and absolutely joyful to spend time with. I truly loved recording this episode with Kate, and I really hope that you take from this not only some inspiration for your own life, but actually practical exercises. Kate actually walks us through several ways to do some deep processing work for yourself around attachment patterns and all sorts of things to do with relating and intimacy. Now, this is a great podcast just to listen to, but again, this was done in person at Kate's home in Virginia. So I really would encourage that if you have video versions of Spotify or you have the facility to get onto YouTube, you actually make this one that you watch. Not only will you have the experience of witnessing Kate's beautiful home, but you will also see the joyfulness in my face as Kate does her first ever podcast interview with me on the Unveil podcast. Welcome to the Unveil podcast, Kate Appleton.
It's wonderful to be here.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. We are not going to manage to show all of this room to our watchers on YouTube and Spotify, but this is a spectacular room to do a podcast in because it's filled with all of your trinkets from your work, which we're going to dig into today, and we're going to discuss lots of things. And so I want to start by giving, I'm clutching, by the way, if people can see, I'm clutching one of Kate's crystals that is part of her collection, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So if people see me gripping, that's what I'm doing because I needed some kind of like energetic support. But we're going to start today by just giving our listeners like the 30,000 foot view of essentially what you do. And I know it's a terrible question for anyone in our field, and I have prepped Kate beforehand and said she can take as long as she needs to answer this question. But if you were going to explain to someone what it is you do, or the question I like to ask is how you serve, what would that be?
Well, I wear many hats. So I'm a teacher and a counselor, a coach, a facilitator. I lead retreats. I guess what I really think of myself as doing is inviting curiosity around our aliveness and inviting a relationship. And when someone is ready to be curious about their aliveness and what blocks it and what those barriers are, then we get to be playful. And I invite those kind of relationships in. So I might work with an individual or a family and a couple. I might work with practitioners, clinicians, in a various different ways. So sometimes I'm wearing the hat of the counselor, and sometimes I'm wearing the hat of the mentor and the supervisor for a practitioner. And sometimes I'm leading a retreat, and we're doing self-discovery, or we're inviting spiritual emergence, or gosh, so many different hats and many different experiences. Because for me, in the end, it's how can I invite a relationship with another person to help them find their aliveness and find their authentic voice and their authentic self. And we really struggle with that in the world right now. There are
Yes.
so many barriers. There are so many um, ways that we interrupt that process and get stuck, like I'm feeling right this second.
And it's so interesting because this is your first podcast interview.
Yes, it is.
And you're sitting with me, and we should just let our long-term listeners know that you are Will Reason's mum.
Oh, yes.
And I want to give that context because that's why we're here. And our listeners will know Will and know that Will is my coach. But it's so interesting having the experience of being in your space and seeing your evolution over the time of your career and just all of the things you've moved through. We've had this conversation a couple of times about, you know, how to capture your life or your work within an interview, and that's going to be difficult to do, so we're not going to cover it all today, and it's okay that we don't. But honestly, if you guys could just look around this room, the way Kate breathes life into this work that she does is really quite unique. It's very creative, it's very just filtered through all of the lenses. But you've told me so many just anecdotes in the last, I don't know, 48 hours of things, and you seem to work with a wide variety of people. Is there any kind of limitations to who you work with? Are there people that you work with specifically, or do you spread things around? What's your kind of default client, if you like?
Well, now it's a little different than it was. So the history of my work would be that I've worked with all kinds of populations, predominantly complex trauma. I would say that has been the dominant population. And yet when I think about trauma, trauma will show up in different populations very, very differently.
Yes.
So if I'm working with uh, a population of somebody like, let me think a minute, foster care. Okay, so say a child is removed from a family and put into foster care, and social services asked me to take the case because it's so complicated that it's difficult to find somebody who has the expertise to work the case.
Yes.
Somebody who can go into a courtroom and know really how to advocate for the child and the family and know how to be neutral. That's a very different population than, say, a family who has tremendous wealth and is asking me to step into their lives and support a reframing of how the story goes in those relationships. So again, very different populations. Or whether I'm teaching to practitioners or whether I'm working as a group therapist with a bunch of teenage girls, like 13 to 16, that kind of group work is really different than individual work.
And you seem to have done it all. Like, I feel like just from the variety that you've spoken about, it feels like your life has been dedicated to supporting your own personal evolution, but that has evolved a body of work at the same time.
Yes. Yes. I think that over time, my curiosity takes me on many journeys. So I am a seeker and very curious. I think if we can be still in the pause and create some wonder in the pause, we find there's more there than we are aware of. In our busy lives, we're so fast creating story after story after story that we seldom pause and find the space between. The space between is delicious for me. And often is the place where metaphor can take form. And in that form, someone can create new meaning.
Speak to us a little bit about metaphor, because we've spoken about metaphors and archetypes and various things over the last, couple of days. And if you were to give people a very potentially brief overview, but just a high level overview of some of the ways you work with things like metaphor and archetypes. Can you give us a window into that from your perspective to give our listeners a little bit more of a grasp of what you're talking about?
Sure. So archetypes are as old as the history that records them.
Mm.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it's the roles we play,
Mm.
and it's found in astrology. It's found in religion. Um, it's found in history, and it's certainly found in systems
Mm.
like our family systems.
Mm-hmm.
So the inner child, the inner mother, the inner father, right? The saboteur, the hero, the heroine.
Mm.
Those are all archetypes. Those take form in a metaphor or a story.
Mm.
And so when I'm working with someone, let's say the person is a photographer, and I will invite that individual to pay attention to and be playful with
Mm-hmm.
the idea of working behind the camera.
Mm.
So, what is that individual noticing through the eyes of the camera? That individual might be the watcher.
Mm.
How often is he a participant?
Mm.
And what's looking back at him?
Mm.
What is he noticing through his lens in his relationships?
Mm.
And what is he paying attention to and what is he not seeing?
Mm.
And so we talk about lens, we talk about the filter that he uses
Mm.
to engage his relationships with his spouse or his children.
Yeah.
What is missing and what is he filtering out?
Yeah.
How does he frame things?
Mm.
Yeah, so all of our conversations then take on a flavor of his language.
Yes.
And that's a metaphor,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a way into a relationship, and then it's a way to be playful.
Mm.
And then it's a way for us to dance, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between us
Mm-hmm.
with images.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's certain things I want to touch on today as well. I really want to dig into the creativity piece because this feels like everywhere I look in your space, in your home, everything is, it's not just playful, it's playful with the intention of being inspirational, which to me is that creative part of it. And honestly, you showed me around your cupboards yesterday and you could literally set up an art studio here. And you was like, well, you were like, I did, you know? So talk to me about the creativity piece and why that's a lead in for you. Why is it such a pull and why does it work in your opinion?
Well, creativity is life force. Yeah.
Mm.
Life force begins in creativity
Mm-hmm.
and it's juicy.
Mm.
It's it's how we find the reframe. Okay. And so for me, I started out as a very creative person.
Mm-hmm.
I danced when I was younger for the Cleveland Civic Ballet Company. I even auditioned for the Bolshoi once. I didn't make it because I was too tall, but I had
Their loss.
that. Well, it was fun. It's something I can say, right?
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And so I danced, and I was an art major, and I taught art and taught theater, and I'm creative.
Yeah.
So by the time I was a teacher,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm using all of that modality in that part of my brain, the right
Mm.
side of my brain.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm truly truthful about the authentic me, it is in the life force that is constantly creating new ideas, new
Mm.
stories, new ways to frame something.
Yes.
And for me, that's going to be a constant seeking of something new that is birthing and it's transforming. And so I'll use art, I'll use sandtray, I'll use music, I'll use sound, I'll use visuals, I'll use movement. And all of that has been a part of my life forever, whether I was a teacher or a therapist or a coach or whatever, you
Mm.
know.
And this gives us a great jumping off point to dig into some of the history, because as our listeners know, this is the Unveil podcast, and I'm really interested in getting into why people end up where they are. And we will talk much more about the work as we go through this, but I'm really interested in the evolution. And you began with creativity, but over time, creativity seemed to not be about performing on a stage and much more into whether that's inner work or personal development or, counseling, whatever we want to call it. And we've been having a debate for the last, I don't know, 4 days about like names and things. And it's difficult in our work. What do we actually do, especially when there's licensure involved and things like that? But if we strip away the terminology and we just talk about the journey that you took, can you give us a little bit of a window into the evolution of your craft at the beginning stages? So how did we get from being, creative and just having art teaching into the more personal development or inner
Mhm,
work?
mhm. Well, I would say that, as with most of us, we each have a journey. And my journey took me through many different experiences and events. And some of them were deep woundings
Mm.
that I crawled my way out of. I've had experiences that were probably one would consider out of the ordinary. And I think that my work with trauma, it comes out of my own understanding that the experiences that I had inform a deep level of invitation for transformation. And so each one of those events led me to where I am today. And the event itself, I don't think is as juicy as the journey, right? And so in the end, that journey brings me to being here now. And I've learned a lot about my nervous system. I've learned a lot about the defenses that we have and the barriers that prevent us from accessing our authentic self. I learned that along the way
Mm.
by doing my personal development work, by working with mentors, by seeking again trainings upon trainings where I could delve deeper and get a taste of that authentic part of me that was walled off because of my reaction to the events. So again, the event then isn't what holds the juice. It is my reaction to the event. And over time, that evolved and changed. And eventually I went from um, focusing so much on the wounds to being able to go, okay, so what's in creating a barrier to living fully instead of living in reaction to those events. And how do I do that even if I know what the barrier is? Even if I know that, my anxiety creates a panic in reaction to something that happens in a relationship. Well, I can get stuck in the relationship trigger, or I can look at the anxiety and try and treat that with medicine or some such thing, right? Or I can be curious about the experience itself, about the defense mechanisms that arise, the barriers that I put up and that I use, and the patterns in that, and then learn to ride the waves and, kind of be present with the emergence of the defense itself. Learn how to be okay with the defense. Learn how to be present with it and pause and be like, okay, I'm anxious right now. I'm nervous. I'm being interviewed. It's a new experience. Can I be here right now with that? Notice my heart beating a little faster than normal. Find my sit bones again. Find my breath. Give myself real permission. Revisit that authentic part of me that is being invited to show up and be seen. Notice what that's like in all the nervousness and all the curiosity. And then really listen. Like, notice the room I'm in. Notice your smile and the brightness of your eyes. Be with your breath and mine. And be really present with what's arriving and really listen. it's different to have the focus be on me.
Mm.
I'm used to the focus being on my client.
Mm.
And I can be with the elephant in the room.
I adore what you just did, Kate, because you literally just live on this podcast walked your way through a self-led journey of stabilization, orientation, all of the things. And I don't think anyone's ever done that. So thank you for showing up wholly. And I think that's the thing. It's like you and I have had this conversation of like, we have roles that we play and, I'm in podcast interview mode right now and my authentic self is here somewhere, but also my interviewer hat is there. But fully showing up is being all of those things in the slight anxiety, in the, am I going to ask the right questions? Am I going to how do I get the best for this person in this moment? And what you've just done is demonstrate in real time for our listeners. And I hope if people are not watching, just go and watch this, because that was a visual, observable movement from constancy of this into the kind of settledness. And that, it seems so simple, but I think we get caught in the fact that because it seems simple, we should just be in the settledness.
Yeah.
And what I love you speaking to and highlighting is the process and the self journey that leads most of us in this work into being able to serve. It comes from us first and us being with us.
Mm-hmm. It does. And I really noticed that my journey is taking a new shape now. I spent so much of my life worrying about what other people think and in a place of enoughness. Am I enough? Is my work enough? I could work 83 hours a week. Yeah. Is that enough? Is my work enough? Have I trained enough? I just one more class, right?
One more certificate.
That's yes. Right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And then, is it too much? Is my bio too much now? And what do I share and what don't I say? That's about enoughness. That is, how do I know when it's time to yield? When enough is enough and I can settle and I can find me in the midst of that. Yeah. And that journey is a journey that I've taken in allowing my authentic self to begin to emerge and not be so dependent on what I do. It's a different journey. When we spend our lifetime focused on the external and on what we're doing, we often miss the opportunity to allow the being to emerge. And for me, when I was a little girl, I didn't like being around other people. I was very shy. I was selectively mute. I played by myself. I played in nature. I played in fantasy. I was, really playing behind the veil. So I was born on Samhain. I was born in early November. It is when the veil is the thinnest in the world. So I could be called one who walks two worlds. And I'm very comfortable moving between those two states. One is form and well-shaped. One is not. One is formless, invisible, and yet so juicy, so real. For me, tangible, energetic, vibrational, has frequency, has light, has capacity, invites curiosity, is aliveness. And I'm trying to fit myself into the form world, the shape, the concreteness, the chair, the weighted, the structure, the form. And for me, over time, that has included an invitation to the world of mystery, the world of spirit. I was raised in a Christian home, not a Christian home that denied exploration. My father, as Episcopal priest, held a middle path. He invited curiosity. I remember him teaching me that God is in the breath, in ruach, right? It is in the breath. It is in the question, not the answer. Yeah. Because in the question, we arrive to curiosity, our eyes open, yes? Our heart open for discovery. And that to me is where the divine is. That's where the relationship is. If we're looking for answers, it cuts us off. It fixes something, right? And as soon as we fix something, what happens? It's done. Yeah? It stagnates. It's done. It has no place to go. I want to invite an open curiosity. I want to invite my eyes open. Yeah? Ruach, the breath. And that takes me on a journey of discovery. And in that journey of discovery, then I'm like, what's arriving in the formless? I'm back to that again.
Yeah.
So in my childhood, it was fantasy and story, yeah, and energy. I could see spirits. I could feel energy. I could see things other people couldn't see. And of course, there were people troubled by that, but I wasn't. And then, of course, I moved from that to learning how to be here, not liking it very much, but then learning how to adapt. And in that adaptation, yes, learning how to function in the world. So I would work 83 hours, right? I spent my whole time serving others, caring for others, the caretaker, the mother, the teacher, the counselor. Yeah. And now in my late 60s, I'm ready to return to the formless and the form and the intersection between the two. I want to know how to integrate those because to be fully in the formless is not to be here. To be fully in the form to me is to miss the life force. Okay. Because that's just a body.
So interesting.
I mean, that's just the body. So everything is about somatics and embodiment now, right? And I don't want to just be in the body. I want to be there, but I want to be there in the experience of the formless, in the experience of the invisible energy that is, to me, the life force exists inside form. That's called being human. We're not angels. They're formless. We are formed. And we are spirit embodied in form. And that intersection, that integration is the juicy place that I want to spend my life being curious about from now until I become formless once again.
Oh, I adore this. I really love what you've just said because I think whilst people might not be that connected to it, my suspicion is that's the journey that quite a lot of people are going through, this kind of relationship with the form principle. How does matter feel? It's dense. How do we inhabit matter without it becoming something that weights us down and drags us into death, almost into that kind of like lack of flow? And so we have these interesting popularized things. You mentioned it, like somatics is everywhere, embodiment is the thing. And then we have the flow state principle, which is another thing that's really popular at the moment. It's like getting into flow states. And I'm like, we're missing some kind of natural essential life force, as you say, at this moment in time. And this kind of contemplation about formlessness being as rich, if not richer, than the formation. And we should say that we are here under the auspices of attending a somatic-driven workshop that got interrupted in the middle due to circumstances. But it feels very much like there is this integration piece that you and I have spoken about in our private conversations of how do we dance these two worlds, particularly in the professional lens, where there is the responsibility to abide by a certain set of criteria and rules. And yet what we really want to do is like throw the rules out the window and just dance in the experiential potentials of possibility. And it's difficult. And I think that for you, what I'm witnessing from you is this childlike enthusiasm for being in the interplay of the unknown and the lack of answers and the lack of form at a time when your career is really at a time of almost taking off again in
Yeah, it
another whole
is.
way, where people are
That's so
calling
true.
you into form and saying, please be here, please show up as an identity.
Mhm.
And it's so interesting to me that you're still in this moment of being, yeah, but the magic and the mystery is kind of there somewhere.
It's true, I mean, I'll be speaking in 2 weeks at a pretty significant event,
Mm,
and I'll be talking about frequencies and sound frequencies
mm,
and how they can be useful in healing
mm,
and stabilizing a nervous system.
mm,
And yet, frequencies are not something we often think of as form.
mm.
Okay, that is a part of science that is relatively new.
Yes, for sure.
I would say
Hmm.
relatively new,
Mm.
and invites us to accept things that we cannot see.
Yes.
So when I have a client and I'm working with a client who struggles with, regulation, what I call regulation would be like anxiety, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then I invite them to trust a program that is a sound program that works with frequencies that they cannot see and they cannot necessarily identify.
Mm,
That is asking them to step into the realm of the formless.
mm,
And yet it is integrated into form. And with those two, we're inviting a dance to happen. For me, that dance also includes a dance of science and energy, or the formless, or spirit, or evolutionary consciousness. There's so many terms nowadays.
mm.
It's certainly not religion, but it is this mystery.
Yeah.
And I go back to that word because mystery is not connected or paired with religion, or a new age concept. So I'm putting those two together. I'm saying to be fully embodied, to really connect to the somatic experience of our sensory world. That means to be connected to movement, to posture, to gesture, yeah, to sound, to sight, to all those senses in that sensory realm, which also means proximity. Yes. Proprioception means vestibular. All those are part of the sensory world of the physical world. I'm also inviting us to be present to that mystery. At least with my clients, I'm inviting that. It's the integration of those two
Mm.
experiences because they're different states.
Yeah.
Yeah. One is a different state of consciousness than the other. When we're aware that both of those are at play, then I think we can also be more aware of our defenses and the barriers that prevent us from staying in that place of curiosity. Those barriers are simply part of a defense system that is natural, that's necessary, that we really want to have. We still want to have fear, we want to have anger. All those things are part of the life force, yes. And there are barriers that prevent us from feeling our aliveness. And again, our aliveness depends on our life force.
Yeah.
And that to me is not just jot and tittles of atoms and atoms, it's the space between them.
Yeah.
I just don't want to let go of the space between the atoms. I mean, it is the space where the life force and the energetic footprints, no, blueprints, no, whatever,
Mm.
right? Whatever it is in that space is the life force. The particles are part of it. They hold it in action,
Mm-hmm.
but the space is juicy. Anyway, can you tell I get excited
I
about
can,
it?
and I love it, and I love your excitement and your sheer passion for this is so infectious. And I'm just spending time with you. I kind of get really excited about all the potentials and all of those possibility fields. And I also, you drop in so many kind of like half references to things that I also want to bring you back to sort of like more in specificity, because there's such interest, because what I get the sense of is that your dance within this space now comes because you've studied a lot of structures.
Oh, yes.
And it feels to me like you've had to learn the models to go, okay, we'll take the useful bits and then we'll just like go, maybe we'll throw that one away, and not necessarily throw it away in a negative way, but just move beyond the structure to the potential that they're creating, the kind of literally the action potential in the end point of the system. And you've mentioned a lot of times, a couple of times in this conversation, but also during our time together, about attachment and the relational nature of things. And it feels like this is a real undercurrent for you in terms of it moves beneath quite a lot of your orientation and your work. And I'd love for you to speak a little bit to this notion of attachment and why it's so important and what it even means.
Sure, sure. Well, attachment can mean different things to different systems. So traditionally, Bowlby would talk about attachment as bonding, as how we create relationship. Certainly, the attachment field is dominated more around early development between baby and mama. That would be the main theory and the way it is used. Nowadays, we're applying that to adult relationships and how our early formation in our relationship with mama, and primary caretakers. So nowadays, that could be dad.
Yeah.
So forget about that.
I know.
Have
We have to put
add
all the
that in.
caveats.
We have
Yeah.
to put all that in there. So nowadays, we're taking those patterns that evolve out of the movements from the early bonding time, and we're applying that to our adult relationships and seeing how they connect. Attachment beyond that for me means how I create belonging, how I create not just family but systems. Attachment for me is really truly how I interact with myself, my relationship to the mystery, and my relationship to other people and to animals and to the world, to my relationship with my work. See, those are all relationships. So for me personally, attachment is broader. I do look at the early patterns.
Yes.
I'm really fascinated by looking at the somatic movements of our early, like 0 to 3 months.
Yeah.
Really, 3 or 6 months, maybe. I'm really interested in that. So I have studied a lot of different people's view on this, and I like to kind of integrate parts of it. I think it's really important for people to not hijack other people's work, and I say that because sometimes people will take an introduction to somatic experiencing and then call themselves a somatic experiencing practitioner,
Yes.
and they've only had one workshop. And so I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like delving in and really beginning to understand the concepts around such things. I have begun to do that in the field of attachment. I'm very curious about these early movements that Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen has taught in body mind centering. I'm interested in applying that to the barriers that come up that make it difficult for us to have those good relationships. Some of that I've learned from Embodied Recovery, which is another modality that works with attachment and how that gets applied to eating disorders. So there are many different trainings that I've been to help me be playful around human relationships. And out of that, then I'm looking for the patterns. Where are the patterns that get repeated? Yes. So if I'm talking to a family, let's say a husband and a wife, and they're struggling in their communication style, then my example would be to have them, well, let me just walk you through one. Shall I?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll have husband and wife back to back sitting on the floor. Yes. And they'll lean in to each other and feel where they are. And then I'll ask one of them to begin to pull away from the other one. What is it like to pull away from your partner? And then what is it like to have him leave? So I'll speak to her. What is it like for him to leave? What does that feel like? Really tune in to being left. And then what is it like to know he's not really gone, but he's pulled away from you? And then come back and I'll say to him, find her with your back. Find her with your back. And then for her, what is it like to be found? Really be found. Yeah. And we reverse it. And what is it like for her to leave him? And what is it like for him to feel her leaving him? And can they feel the space between them? What's it like for her to find him again, to return, to be found, to find him again? Yeah. And then I'll have them turn to each other and face each other. And then what is it like to gaze at each other and be found from our front, which is very different to be found from our back. So that's attachment in a new framework. Or I'll have you sit here and I will give you a pillow for your mom, and then a pillow for your dad, and then a pillow for your grandma, and a pillow for your grandpa on your mother's side. And then a pillow for your grandma and a pillow for your grandpa on your father's side. Then all your siblings would be in your lap. And pretty soon you can...
Yes, I can see these pillows mounting up now.
Yeah. It's great when I do it with a couple. It's really fun when I do it with a couple.
Lots of extended families, yeah.
Because like the pillows are here and like they can't really see each other. I'm going, this is what it's like when you're in bed. And they're like, what? I'm going, yeah. I mean, like you have to see through all those relationships to the other.
That's amazing.
Okay.
That's so good.
And then just imagine, not only am I seeing through all these pillows, yes, but I got to find you through all the pillows you have.
Oh, no. It's like the worst pillow fight imaginable.
Well, then what happens next is, which one of those pillows are you ready to let go of? And before you let them go, what was the belief they gave you?
Oh, this is so good.
So in that belief, are you ready to let it go?
Yes.
And I had a man do this, and we got all the way down, and we had his little self had to be there.
Okay.
His 5-year-old self had to be there.
Yeah.
And his grandma was there.
Oh.
Okay. And he started to weep. And he said, I don't think I can let grandma go. And I said, you don't have to. You can keep her. I mean, it might be kind of awkward when you're having sex with your wife. Yeah. But you could keep her there. Yeah. Maybe she could, like, be asleep in the chair.
Yeah. Yes.
And what are you going to do with your 5-year-old self? Yeah, your 5-year-old self. Oh, well, the 5-year-old can't be in the bedroom when we're having sex. Yeah. Well, and where's the little boy going to be? The little boy self. And how often do men struggle with the little boy showing up in the middle of sex? Yeah. And how often are they thinking about the messages from a primary caregiver, in this case, maybe grandma? Yeah. And then what if all those stories involve things that were tragically that happened to mom and dad? Yeah. All of that is in the middle of the attachment system.
Yes.
And so I want to be playful. Yes. So it is holding the tension in the field and bringing your awareness, attention, to the tension that is in the field. And that's the invisible part. That's the mystery part.
And I love that it seems like what you do with these exercises is make it not only visible, but physiologically present as a spacious taking upness thing with the pillows or the exercise with the, it's bringing into form something that is essentially formless is what it feels like to me as you describe it. And I can almost like, I want to go and get a load of pillows and like try this myself. It's like, because it feels like this stuff that we just walk around with as our invisible baggage It's like we can only get rid of or let it go or set it down, whatever, or integrate it, whatever terminology we want to use. We can only do that once we become aware of what we're actually carrying.
Yes.
And there's so much that we have to identify, bring awareness to prior to being able to really liberate ourselves from that. But I love the, humorous way and lighthearted way with which you do this. It feels like it's the only way to do it, because if we're doing it really seriously with this kind of like morose concept of our attachment wounding, it's not playing with pillows and like contemplating belief systems. It's negative, it's shameful, it's all those sorts of things. And I just love the kind of spirit you bring to all of this stuff.
Well, I want to invite your curiosity, because without it, we're not going to have change.
Yeah.
All we're going to have is the loop going round and round and round.
Yeah.
And again, making something concrete, which was the exercise we just did.
Yeah.
We're taking something that's formless, which is the concept of attachment, and we're bringing form to it so that we can navigate that world between form and formlessness. We're going to have a concrete, real experience with each other that connects us to a very invisible state, and that can give us an aha. Yes, it gives us that aha, and we go, oh, right. I mean, even when I work with somebody who, let's take, I have an idea. I have an idea. So let's say that I have a couple, and I seem to have a slew of these couples. Have a couple where he is more passive and she is a little bit more present in the room, big in the room, shall we say. And they're trying to navigate the relationship. Yeah. So if I have them stand and begin to walk towards each other, yes, I'm going to do it with my hands. Yeah. So I have them stand and walk towards each other, and then I have them pause. And then because I know my people, right? I'll say, this is the man. Okay. Would you turn around and give her your back? Now, let's have a conversation. Right like this. So I invite dialogue, and then I pause. Right? Freeze frame. Say to the man, can you notice what it's like to have a conversation through your back to your wife? And then I say to the wife, how often does it feel this way? And she puts her hands on her hips and she says, all the time. Okay? Then I say to the man, what does it feel like? What are you paying attention to? What are you noticing? And he says, I cannot see her face, and it feels safer. Because her energy is big in the room. I have to help her soften, and I have to help him turn around. Right? And then I'll say to her, now he's turned towards you. What if you turn sideways? Not with your back, but sideways. Okay? Can you turn sideways? Now have a conversation again. And what is that like? And can you come closer this way? Do you need further away? We're working proximity. We're working a lot in the sensory realm without me saying it.
Right. It's not, oh, by the way, we're doing a somatic principled exercise of sensory
Correct.
experience of the thing.
Correct.
And which I love, because we get caught up in this terminology, theory, all those sorts of things. And people say words that sound cool now, somatics. And people are missing, I believe, people are missing the simple fact that the energy is always present. It's just whether you're paying attention to it, and how can we bring attention to it in a way that feels safe. You're playing with orientation, and, you've got a safe body in the room to mediate, if you like, but also feels like the expression of truth can be there. And that, to speak to your earlier point about curiosity, it's like if you're doing it from we're going to work out the problem today and it's going to be fixed in a session, it's never going to work. It's like, we're going to find something out here. We're going to experiment and play.
And if they come here to do a retreat, like a 5-day retreat, then we get really playful with all kinds of things that include movement, include metaphor with Santre.
I'm just going to pause you there. It's the second time you've mentioned it. Explain Santres, because you really want to do one with me, and I'm like, yes, we may not get time today, but I will have to come back. But explain Santre, because I have looked at your book about this, and I'm kind of, this makes so much sense to me. And if people can see the picture behind me, we can allude to some of this during Santre explanation. So explain what Santre is and why you use it and the power of it and why it brings this alive.
Well, Santre was Margaret Lowenfeld. I could think of lots of other names of great people, Anna Freud. They began to work with the projected field, which comes out of Jung's work and Freud's work with the projected field, meaning we project out here the things that we are working with so that they mirror back to us. And we, in that way, have a relationship or a dialogue with the external world being mirrored to us. And in that sense, the work began with children. And then out of that, it's so powerful that it now is used with adults who are willing to be playful, I might add, because a lot of adults are not willing to be playful. But if you're willing to be playful, it's really fun. So I have lots of things. I have a 12-foot wall, floor almost to ceiling, of objects, little tiny objects that then hold the archetypes or all the different archetypes, the roles people play, the symbols. Really, we call them in the field of body of work, we will call them the images. They hold the image. So I invite people to let their unconscious guide them to make choices. They take things, they put it in literally a tray of sand. In my case, I do teach this work. In my case, I use really good sand. So I have many different kinds of sand. I have some sand that is 90% quartz crystal. It's cold. It feels like flour. I have black volcanic magnetic sand from a place called Cape Disappointment on the Pacific coast. I have orangey sand from the desert of Sedona. Each one has a different mineral, which means a different signature in its frequency, in its weightedness,
And
in
just
its
to say,
energy.
and this is really real. I've had my hands in your sand trays and they each feel different. And I'm quite sensitive, but I don't think it takes a sensitive individual to be able to pick up that this is a different energy. And I was instantly saying to you, I want to play with the red sand. Like I want to be with the red sand. And it was different. And normally I would think I would be like your quartz sand that looks like proper white sand. But no, I was like, this is the one I want to play with. This is like, I don't like the dark sand because they feel different. And so instantly I'm in a different plane of, I suppose, what part of my unconscious or whatever I want to tap into to play with those things. So,
well, and I would say it's what part of your unconscious is showing up, not what you want to tap into, because it isn't so much of a cognitive choice. It is that there's something unconsciously waking up that wants your attention and grabs your attention. And it's not cognitive. It's not like, oh, I want this sand because it's this, this, and this.
Oh, for sure not.
It is an unconscious awakening.
So does it mean, all my listeners are going to be thinking, does it mean anything about me that I went for the red sand? And what does it mean if it does?
No.
It doesn't. Okay.
No. In fact, one of the really important things I teach is that we as clinicians must never make our meaning about the tray. So what arrives is what arrives for the person creating the tray. And the tray is a world. It's seen as a world. And really amazing things happen out of that experience. First, you create it. Then we look at it from bird's eye view, which is entirely different than if you go in from the side. And now we are the dragon. The dragon is really big and it overpowers the whole tray. Or we go around on the other side and we become the little tiny one that's looking up at the dragon. And we get down on the floor and we look up at wow. I mean, looking up at the dragon is totally different than being the bully in the sand tray, right? When I'm the bully in the tray, I am entirely different and I'm embodying a different energy. Well, what if I'm working with somebody who their life has been as a victim. And so they play out this tray because they're thinking cognitively about the victim role. And I say to them, I want you to walk around the tray. I want you to stand in the truth and the power of the dragon. And they're like, I don't know if I can do that. And I'll say, that's where our work is.
Yeah.
Right? Come around, feel into it. Imagine you could step into the big feet with the claws and that you had wings and fire coming out of your mouth. What would that be like to embody the opposite? Yeah. And then who are the bystanders? Who else is in the tray? And I will first ask, who's the narrator? Who's going to speak? Is it the tree? Is it the rock? Is it the bridge? Is it the river through? Who is the speaker? Who is the teller of the story? Through whose eyes will we see this story today? And then who wants to speak? Who is hidden? Who's buried that has no voice? Who's hiding that does not want to be seen? Who's big in the tray? Who's tallest? Who's in the center? Who's hiding in the corner? What has arrived that wants your attention today? We're not going to attend to all of that. We're only going to attend to who the speaker invites us to attend to and the particular story that the storyteller is telling.
It strikes me as we've spoken a lot about telling stories this weekend, and I feel like it strikes me as your biggest mission is to get people to start telling their own stories, maybe in different ways or in ways that feel empowering or in ways that feel alive to them. And I love this whole thought process of essentially a very childish, in inverted commas, activity of playing with like figurines and like making a sand tray. But like I was saying, I've seen the pictures in the book, and you can feel the energy of what was put into those trays that people have done, because it's like, I maybe can't talk about my pain. I maybe don't even know what my pain is right now because I can't allow myself to look at it head on. But if you ask me to look at several cabinets of figurines and shapes and archetypes and symbols and put that into a tray, I can do that. I can actually do that. And then I can see, because it's safe to see my own self, because it's over there. And I play all the time with the concept of othering versus the concept of just placing it slightly outside yourself, so we can allow ourselves to have compassion for it, as well as almost curiosity and neutral feelings. And it feels very much like the frivolity that you bring facilitates that freedom to feel.
Yes, I'm inviting our parts to show up. So in a way, like internal family systems, although I'm not true to the form or the structure, I mean, I think he was great when he created it, but I I'm inviting the parts to come forward and for us to notice the ones that are hiding. Everything in the tray is us. Even the bridge is a part of us, because if we don't have it, how are we going to get from one part to the other part? Yeah. I'm inviting us to be playful with what we're ready to be playful with. So if I'm working, let's say, with a 10-year-old boy whose father has Parkinson's and really and truly is walking the last journey here, and I can see all the elements in the tray of his struggle with letting his daddy go. Well, we're not going to have that conversation, because that's a lot to bring into consciousness. Instead, I can invite him to tell me what the storyteller is ready to talk about. And when he's able to say to me in the tray, there's this huge chasm, was his language, between the worlds.
Mm.
And there's a bunch of stuff happening on one side and on the other side.
Mm.
And I said, wow, wow, how do you get from one to the other? And he was like, we need a bridge. And I said, we do. We do. What should we do about that? And he was quiet. He goes, Miss Catherine, I think we should add something. And I said, go for it, right? Then he was ready to add in a bridge.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
He found the bridge, not me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes?
Mm.
He named that the bridge was what was missing.
Mm.
He found the bridge. And then I said, what happens next? And he said, I think somebody needs to cross it. And I said, who will cross the bridge? And he said, I don't know. I said, can we be with that? Can we be with that? And he looked at me, he said, I think I need you to be there. And I said, okay, find me. And he goes and he finds a representation, yes, and he puts that in the tray. And I say to him, can we be there? Can we just be there in the pause? And we're there long enough for him to feel his feelings, not have to name them with words. Really notice and feel what it's like to see that there is a bridge and no one's ready to cross it. And we have helpers. That's the power in a sand tray.
I have no words, and that's rare for me. And I feel like stepping into your world and this home and all the things that you bring, there is such a different energy. And I went to bed last night with like a headache, and I was very aware that my headache was because there is stuff in this space that I don't normally let into my daily existence. And I don't normally allow myself to be in the magic and the wonder and the play and the creativity. And like, I have long conversations about the fact that I need to get my music back into my life. And it's like, yeah, but I could go and get a drawing book and just start drawing. Like, I'm making this super complicated. I'm making this, I need a piano and I need all my sheet music and I could just go and get a sketchbook and start playing today. And it's so interesting because there is a sense that I get with you is that you feel almost so alive. And I don't know whether that's a now thing, whether that's been a huge evolution and it varies in your past and all those sorts of things, but it feels like you're just beginning something. And I'm so excited. It's like, this is like great. And I wonder where that comes from, if that feels true to you, if I'm just kind of coming into your world at a moment where it is always like this and I'm just seeing it. What's true for you?
Well, actually, I think it's always like this. I've had a bit of drama all the time. If you talk to my family, they would probably tell you I am a drama queen.
Okay.
I have to really work at bringing it back in. But, I started out
in theatre.
I did, and because it was safer to put on a role, somebody else's role, and be somebody else than it was to be authentically me. I was pretty worried about that. I'm by nature a shy person, and so putting on a role is fun.
Yes.
And my mother wrote radio theater. My dad's an Episcopal priest. We were a public family, and so I learned early how to perform. I think now in my life, the last, say, 15 plus years, I am so much more comfortable with myself than I was before. And I love my work. I love to explore and be creative. I love to be playful. I love to invite the unexpected. I would say, that's just me. I think most of my clients would tell you that I'm very outside the box. I am not what you would expect if you went to an average teacher or coach or counselor. I just don't think I do anything according to plan.
You mean you live outside of a rule book? You surprise me, Kate.
Yes, I really do. I really do. Now, I say that, but I have structure. So in my mind, I have structure of where I want to take this wave to go.
Yeah.
But inside that structure is the invitation for surprise, for curiosity, for mystery, for the interplay between form and formlessness, um, and constant movement. That is something I'll be speaking about in 2 weeks. I'll be speaking about the intersection between using sound and using movement, and what happens when we add those two things in order to help the body manage defenses and regulation of the nervous system. As we put these things together, we're far better at getting rich outcomes, yeah, than if we just sit across from each other and talk. That I do like to talk, and yet I want to bring in these other senses, other ways of experiencing relationship. To me, that's where the juice is.
And so if you were talking about your passion at this moment in time, you've spoken to me a bit about all this sound stuff. Just speak to us a little bit about that, because I've always been into frequency and things like that. But you were showing me a diagram yesterday of frequency things and tuning forks. And so where are your current, because you strike me as someone who's never going to stop studying. You're never going to stop buying the next book.
Right.
You're never ever going to stop. So maybe not do more certifications, but where are you currently like looking? Although you are actually doing, aren't you completing like yeah, of course you are. So what are you doing right now in terms of where's your passion taking you?
Well, my passion is taking me beyond just sound frequency.
Okay.
So sound frequency is sort of where I am. And my next training, I hope, is going to be in using the tuning forks, because each one of those frequencies really works with a different energetic band around your whole body. You have these frequencies, and you can actually feel into where there's a vibration that misses a beat, and that we can clear. And when we clear that, it opens up the possibility for movement within the nervous system. We know nervous system is really basically our electrical system.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's an energetic movement. Yes. And if it ain't moving, we're in trouble. We're stuck. So I'm using sound programs that are produced by Unite ILS. So I'm using those programs, and then I'm adding, of course, another layer, which is my interest in using tuning forks. And then beyond that, I'm really interested in evolutionary consciousness. I'm interested in what happens next with feeling into the vibration beyond just my own sphere. And what is that like? Because we're beginning to be curious in science around all that. We're looking to the stars and beyond. We're really looking at how that invisible world now can inform our visible world, and how we can make use of that in healing. And I'm curious. I don't know where that's going to take me. Who knows? I have a feeling that I'm going to end up back where I began.
As we always do.
I mean, where did I begin? I began in the mystery. I began in the world between the worlds, in the land beyond the veil. I began in that place of my relationship with what I call God, my relationship with my own spirituality. In my youth, that was colored by the story of Christianity. And now it still holds that. That's the frame for me. That is my frame. And out of that frame comes curiosity around the formless and around the energy, and how I can have a relationship with that energy. And so I'm back to that. Well, here I am again. Maybe I don't use the same language that I used in my youth, but here I am again. I see myself as becoming more authentically me, in that place of playing in my garden again, like I played in the garden as a child. I played house when I was little. I sang. my friends were the birds and the squirrels. Really, they were. And the invisible beings, really. I had lots of invisible friends. I almost hate to admit that publicly, but I did. I did. I think my parents were worried about that. And yet that was part of the introduction to being human for me.
Mm.
I suspect that as I age, I will go back to being very comfortable on my land.
Mm.
I live at the foothills of the Shenandoah Mountains, I'm here in Virginia. I have a stone labyrinth that I can walk. I can be with the stone people. I can be with the fairies. I can be with the land spirits. I can also be with the realm of the angels, the higher level places, the energies that don't have form. I can be curious about all of that and still have a hat that says I'm very practical. I'm still grounded in science. I'm still working in the field that where I need to be very practical and very structured.
Mm-hmm.
I can do both. I can hold both.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I'm moving towards, I think, is that field, that energetic field that asks me to be present for what isn't seen.
I do have a couple of more questions, but I also want to highlight that your capacity to be in the mystical and the practical has been highlighted just in the last 24 hours. Your battery collection, when we have run out of batteries, is insane. You are so practically set up whilst also having like crystals everywhere and like angels and masks and everything. So yeah, I feel like you're doing this dance of like being in the real world, but also completely within the energetic and owning that from a different place, which I adore and I really appreciate. So several more questions about like how can people work with you and all the kind of those sorts of things. If anyone is thinking about a retreat, I'm just going to endorse that right now from the perspective of having been in your space and been on your land. And actually, even though it is miserable weather here in Virginia, it's very much, I can get the sense that just spending an extended period of time with you would be magical. And the things that somebody would uncover or families would uncover would be unspeakably brilliant. So if people wanted to do that sort of thing, is that completely open to anyone? Do you have specific ways that you work? What's your kind of intake process for things like that?
Well, I don't just work with anyone
Yeah.
because they're coming to my home.
Yes.
It is important that they've done some of their own personal work, that they are grounded, that they're not in the process of working through crisis,
Yep.
of trauma. That doesn't mean that there isn't, a moment of crisis in a family. I do work with families. They come and spend 5 days with me. There needs to be enough connection to their own stability that they could work through some intense work.
Yeah.
The work that I do is intensive. We spend all day together. I have a guest suite here. If it's 1 or 2 people, if it's a big family, then they stay in a Airbnb and come daily. But we work from morning to evening and we are playful. But because we're being playful with very deep material, it's important that the individual is ready to do that and has capacity to be with the depth that would be. That's different for everyone. So I usually invite a discovery call where we really talk about what have you done and what comes up for you when you get triggered and what does a trigger feel like and look like for you? And do you have ways to access good resources and good supports? And what does it look like when you go home? Because if you're traveling here, I have people who travel here from Europe and travel here from all different states in the country. What happens when you go home? Because the integration is important. Now, most of the time I do some, post work with them, but I also want to know what are your supports like at home?
Right.
Yes. And so when people come, we do a variety of different things and it depends on what the intentions are. Usually it involves some look at attachment. It involves looking at our regulatory nervous system, how we defend ourselves when we're frightened, when we're sick, when we're working with the things that make us angry. What does that look like? Yeah. Then I also want to look at archetypally, where are we? Where are we in the process of what is our purpose in life and do we know it? And what is our relationship like to the people that are in our world? Uh, what are what are you wanting to get out of this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I do offer table support.
Mm-hmm.
Table support is not massage. Table support, it looks like helping a person's somatic experience of being regulated feel. And I that it's probably complicated for me to go into.
Yeah.
If you don't know, look at my website. But you know, I do offer
Yeah.
that. Also, I usually include the sound program of um, Safe Sound Protocol,
Mm-hmm.
which is was created by Dr. Stephen Porges, who also created the polyvagal theory. And so that is on my website as well. That helps support the nervous system to
Yeah.
regulate.
Yeah.
Hence the 5 days, because there are 5 hours to the program.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do spend time doing that. And then there's always movement.
Mm.
There's ritual, because I love ritual.
Mm.
Ritual is the outward expression of an internal state.
Mm.
And so when I invite ritual to happen, uh, it allows us to really take the invisible, let it be visible, and then let it return to the invisible. And so we will write our intentions. We will write what we are letting go and releasing. We'll release it to the fire in the center of the labyrinth. We'll watch it transform into smoke, into ash. Then we will return and see now what has arrived. And so we again are continually working within the relational field of attachment with that which is invisible, becoming visible, becoming invisible.
Mm. Mhm. Beautiful. Ah, gosh, want to come myself. So, and we will put all the links to the PVI and Unite conference. There are still virtual tickets available.
Yes.
And we'll put all of those in the show notes. We'll put your website in the show notes so people can look more at what you do and how you do it and other ways to sort of work with you. I have two more questions. The first one is, I'm really intrigued as to if someone was like, well, I don't live in Virginia. I'm not going to travel. I can't possibly work with Kate. Where would you advise people starting with any of this work? It can be a simple suggestion. It can be an exercise that you would recommend doing. If there was one thing where somebody's like, I want to know what's in my formless possibility, or I kind of want to know where I'm at with this attachment thing, or pick any example you want, where would you give people a starting point to maybe play with some of your ideas and your work, but just get an access point for themselves?
Well, I am a seeker. And, you know, we have this thing called the internet. And I'm just sort of thinking that if you go to my website, I have a resource page, and it's like this huge long list of places that you could begin. So you could like touch a link and it would take you to Gabor Mate's work.
Uh-huh.
You could touch a link and it would open up and tell you about somatic experiencing,
Mm-hmm.
embodied recovery,
Mm-hmm.
transforming the experience brain, Steve Terrell's work.
Yeah.
You could look at Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen's work.
Mm-hmm.
You could look at the sound program. So
Mm-hmm.
my sense is explore, stay curious,
Mm-hmm.
ask lots of questions, email me. I'll email you back. You know, start having the conversations. Find someone to have coffee with. Be curious about your questions. Air them. Listen to the feedback. Be curious about what's happening in your body in response to their feedback from your questions. Live in the questions. Do not think that staying in the answer is ever going to bring you change. How's that?
That's awesome. Also, we'll put your resources page in the show notes so people don't even have to go to the internet Google machine, and they can just literally click on one link and then click off from there. So we will do all of that. And that's very supportive. And I think that you're absolutely right. There is two things there. There is, yes, go and do the things, but also just be in the next coffee conversation you have. Fully be there and see how different it is to fully be having coffee, even with a friend, than not being there fully present.
Well, I would also say the exercise that we did today.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You could imagine going home to your partner
Mm-hmm.
and being playful.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm thinking coming up behind somebody who's maybe setting the table and giving them a hug and then saying, let's be playful. I'm going to put my back to your back and feel what it's like to say hello back to back. What is it like to actually push in to the partner and then pull away and do it back to back
Mm-hmm.
and be playful with the exercise
Mm-hmm.
and just see. Be playful, be curious, ask questions, have coffee, have tea, sit, explore, be open,
Mm.
invite all those possibilities that happen in the intersection between the known and the unknown. Be in the space between. Touch it. Stay there a moment. Let it be delicious. How's that?
That's awesome. My final question, which is probably null and void now, but I was just going to ask if there's anything else that we haven't touched on today that you feel like you want to share, that you want to just highlight, that you want to speak into, anything else that we haven't mentioned that you feel like is worth speaking about.
Let me think a minute.
Mm.
You know, I haven't talked very much about my work with practitioners.
Oh, okay. I'm interested. Obviously, I have my academy and training practitioners at this moment in time, but yes, talk to me about your work with practitioners.
Well, that's sort of where I get to have fun with the content. Yes.
Yes.
And so if you're a nurse, an OT, meaning an occupational therapist,
Mm-hmm.
a psychotherapist, a doctor, a life coach, a doula.
Mm.
These are the types of people that work with me.
Mm-hmm.
They often come because they want some what we call supervision,
Supervision, yeah. Mm-hmm.
which just means they want some help with a case. And
Mm.
I love to work cases. I love it. I love it. It's so rich. It's so fun. I
Okay.
get to play, right?
Uh-huh.
And usually after the first session, then we're playing with their life. Because if we're really going to work a case, we're going to look at how you show up in that case, because remember, it's all in the field, in
Mm-hmm.
what's in the field
Mm.
and what's showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And because I do have like a laundry list of different modalities that I've played with, on the spot, in the moment, I'm going to generate ideas.
Yeah.
That is part of my personality. I might not think of them ahead of time, but in the relationship, yes,
Yeah.
all those ideas are going to come up.
Mm-hmm.
So it's rich to be able to do casework. I
Mm-hmm.
love it. I love it. And then take time before the end of the session to go, okay, so where are you in this case? Like, who are you in this case? Are you the part of the man, like in the man that's passive, right? And the woman that's big in the room? Where are you? Are you the woman who's big in the room? Are you the man that is passive? Are you giving your client your back? Are you giving your client your heart? How do you shield? How do you hold your notebook? If the person in the room is huge in their energy and you're like, whoo, big energy, can I hold a book right here? Can I cross my legs? Can I turn sideways? Can I turn this way and look over this way? How do I hold my shape in order to be with your shape and hold who I am and have a nice, good boundary and also remain playful, remain invitational? So, those kinds of things are what I'm going to touch on in my work with practitioners. It's not really going to be teaching in that formal sense. That I'm sort of hoping to maybe create a training someday. Right now, what I'm doing is that interplay between casework and the human work in the practitioner.
Yeah.
What can she or he learn about themselves in the midst of that case? Because it's all there, right? Any person that we're working with, we have karma with. We have a lesson to learn. They've come to us, we've come to them. We are in play and we both have things to learn. So that's, transference, countertransference. Those are the professional words.
The words.
I would say that is the field between.
Yeah.
And I love the richness of working with practitioners. I also invite them here to, to do their work. Sometimes practitioners send me their client, and I will do a piece of work with their client,
Sure.
and then send the client back to them. And then I will do work with the practitioner around what happened in the field of the retreat. And then I will continue on with the practitioner about that client rather than taking the client, right?
Amazing.
I'm working really with the practitioner. And so it allows us to be collaborative. It allows us to expand our resource space. I often will say, you know what? You really need to go talk to the teacher at school. And we really need an OT here. Like, you can be playful with SSP, but you need an OT to expand the toolbox. And if you can't find one, then let's find one together.
And build the team.
Yes, build the team, because a team works better than an individual.
Yes. Yeah.
Collaboration's super important.
And all of that. I mean, I'm literally excerpting this and giving this to my students and saying, look at all of this body language and stuff. And it's so interesting to me in terms of where we get to in our clinical professional practice when we start to see the dynamics and how they show up, and then how we can help our coaches who are our clients, or our practitioners who are our clients, shift their embodiment to shift their capacities and the way they're showing up as a coach. So I love that you actually spoke about that at the end here, because I feel like some of our audience will be exactly those people and will be like, oh my goodness, I need to book a call with Kate. So that's amazing.
And I do, sessions on Zoom all over the world. I have a client in Amsterdam, one in London. I have people in, I guess, 5 states in the country, and we're playful on Zoom. Lots of different practitioners that are seeking support. And in that way, we, I don't have a name for it. I guess I'm mentoring in a way.
Mentorship sounds about right,
or eldering. There is that part of, I'm at that age, the crone, the crone shows up, and I get to be eldering, which is really fun.
It's wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, Kate. I have loved your energy and your enthusiasm throughout this conversation, and also how practical this was, as well as being in the dance of the mysterious and the energetic. And I know that our listeners will have got so much from this episode.
Thank you. It's been fun. I love to play.
Was your first interview okay?
Yes.
Good. We did it. Thank you for joining myself and Kate today on the Unveil podcast. I hope that you loved that as much as I loved recording that episode. I honestly reflected afterwards and thought, I think that's one of my favorite episodes I have ever done. I genuinely loved Kate's little practical tips and tools and techniques and exercises, and I really hope that you try them. If you do experiment and you enjoy what you find, or not, please leave us feedback. Give us a follow on Instagram or subscribe on YouTube. Give us the feedback about what you thought about this episode. Go find Kate. All of the links to follow her are in your show notes. And if you would like to attend the Polyvagal Institute conference, I actually think they're calling it a gathering or a summit, but there's an event this very week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, if you are listening to this the week it has been released. You are very, very welcome to join us virtually. Myself and Kate will be there, along with previous Unveil podcast guests, Will Reason and Jan Winhall. But you can join us virtually, and all of the links that you need to find that are in the show notes too. Kate offers intensive retreats for individuals, families, and healing practitioners, and all of her links, including some super useful links that she actually emailed me after this recording, are also in the show notes. So this is a wealth of resources for you, and so many places that you can jump off if you've been inspired by anything that Kate shared on today's episode of the Unveil podcast.